Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how artists use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Today we're discussing one of the hardest, most important, and often most mysterious parts of the writing process, how to take a script draft that has potential and take it to the finish line. So once again, we have our good friend and Dolby Creator Lab Grant winner, Carlos López Estrada. He's brought together another A-list panel of writers and producers from film and television to offer some practical, honest, and often very funny advice about taking notes, protecting your voice, figuring out the note behind the note, falling back in love with the script, and perhaps most importantly, learning when to hold on and when to let go. I'll let Carlos take it from here.
Rewrites are hard. Sometimes you can spend months. Many times people spend years perfecting their scripts, and it's a process that really makes the difference between an idea that has potential, an idea that is good, and then a piece of writing that is totally undeniable. And the deeper you get into the process, the more people that get involved, the harder it is to sort of like navigate how to protect your voice, and then also remain sort of like open-minded. And often you have to sort of like navigate relationships with producers and financiers. If you're lucky or unlucky, I don't know, a studio, if you're working in a writer's room. So today we're here to figure out exactly how you do this, and you're going to walk away with all the knowledge you need to never struggle through a rewrite. We wanted to bring together a group of stellar writers alongside film executive, a head of film at a major production company who is extraordinary, and to just hear about this process from different vantage points, and to get very technical and very practical about the craft and the psychology and the collaboration behind the process of a rewrite. So I'm going to introduce our incredible panelists, starting with Marcus Gardley, who's a good friend and a great writer. He is a poet, a playwright, a screenwriter. He wrote the screenplay for the reimagining of The Color Purple, which came out 3 years ago, and it's a great movie. He is a 2019 Obie Award winner for his play The House That Will Not Stand. And in television, he has written for Made, Boots Riley's I'm Virgo, The Chai, Foundation, Tales of the City, and Netflix's Mind Hunter. He is also the co-chair of the Playwright program at the David Geffen School of Drama at Yale University. Marcus, thank you. He's also mentored for us so many times in our different programs, and has done a couple of these, and always just shows up with a smile. So thank you, Marcus.
It's my honor. Thank you for having me.
Next, we have Aiyana K. White, who is a TV and screenwriter, born and based in LA. She is currently writing on Amazon's new Stargate series, and her other writing credits include the upcoming third season of Severance, you may have heard of it, Netflix's The Night Agent, and Showtime's Billions. Thanks, Aiyana, for being here. Our mutual friend said that you're here to spoil the entire season of Severance, and we can't wait.
If anyone from Severance is here, I'm not going to do that.
And I'm sorry, I just got you in so much trouble. Next, we have George Watsky, who is a multidisciplinary artist originally from San Francisco. He has released 6 studio albums as Watsky, and has toured with his live band at clubs and festivals all around the world. His debut essay collection, How to Ruin Everything, was a New York Times bestseller, and he was a 2026 Sundance Screenwriters Lab Fellow for his script Yellowwood, which is his first feature, and he's developing it at Antigravity Academy. Amazing. And last but not least, we have John Cohen. Welcome, John, who is the head of film at Bad Robot Productions. His producing credits include 10 Cloverfield Lane, The Cloverfield Paradox, Overlord, Lou, and most recently, David Robert Mitchell's next film, Flowervale Street, which is set to release in August of this year. He will next produce J.T. Molnar's latest film, Skeletons, starring Brie Larson for Film Nation. And before working at Bad Robot, he was at Davis Entertainment and a Donner's Company. What's up, John? Thank you for coming.
Great to be here. Thank you for letting a producer into the mist.
Uh, you're a friend, not a foe, until you give hard notes. Uh, Thank you all for making time. You could be doing so many other things with your evening, but you chose to be here. So thank you. I'm supposed to say that we have a Q&A function somewhere in there, and at the end of the session, we're gonna try to answer as many questions as possible. So if you have any burning thought that you would like these people to answer, please drop it there, and we'll try to get to all of them. All right, so to get started, we'll just get right into it. Could each of you, and whoever wants to go first, just talk to us a little bit about a recent project that you worked on, and just like a summarized timeline of what happened from sort of like the first draft until you had a finished script. I know that's an impossibly like tricky thing to summarize into like a short bite, but if you can, just curious to know about the highlights of the life of this script from the moment it was first like someone's idea or a first draft all the way to you being like, all right, we're ready to make this thing happen. Feel free to take the question in whatever direction makes sense to you. Okay, anyone wants to go first?
So I am a interdisciplinary artist, and I started off as a spoken word poet, and then I toured as a musician for many years and wrote an essay collection. And I'm just now pivoting to what I studied in college, which was dramatic writing, and getting my first feature made with Antigravity. So yeah, I'm right in the thick of things. The script is called Yellowwood, and it's a romantic sci-fi comedy based on a crazy personal experience that I had. It's been a very quick process from the idea to now. But with that said, we haven't made it yet. So there's still a lot of runway left to go. I believe it was the beginning of January, about 13 months ago, that I had the idea. And then I wrote the rough draft of the script really fast in a month. And then pitched it to Antigravity. A few weeks later, Carlos said, let's dive in. And then we spent another year, essentially maybe 9 months, going through a bunch of drafts of that script, rewriting it, tearing it down, starting over, and it got better every time. And then it was this past October that we submitted it for the Sundance Lab. I did that this past January. So now I'm in the midst of trying to apply the notes that I got at Sundance to that script. I don't know the answer, how many more iterations it's going to go through before we decide it's ready to shoot. But yeah, it hasn't been very long so far. I think that's a pretty quick timeline from having the idea to now. But with that said, I had a kind of interesting year before that where I wrote a bunch of rough drafts really fast and then would shake the Etch-a-Sketch and start over. And I think I'm going to talk more about that a little bit later. But I was getting in the habit of really fast rough drafts because I have a tendency to be paralyzed by the desire for perfection and not getting the rough draft vomited out. So I really tried hard to force myself to break that habit this past year and a half.
Anyone else would want to go? Thanks, George. We're going to dive deeper into your goodness.
I'll just leap in. So the project that I recently finished, or one of them that I most recently finished, was a feature script based on a book. The book is called The Fire Is Upon Us. It's about the debate between James Baldwin and William F. Buckley. And so what's interesting is just trying to get that job, pitching the studios and really trying to get that job. First, trying to get the job because they were going out to several writers. So just getting the job to even pitch to the studio was step one. Step two is once I was lucky enough to get the job was coming up with a pitch, that in 30 minutes, how to explain what the film was going to be about. What's my approach? And then we made through that hurdle, which that took about 6 months. And then I got into the writing of it. And what was interesting is I realized as I was writing it that what I pitched didn't work, that I had to go into a new way because this now exists, in sort of 3D on the page. And so I had to go at a whole new different way. And I struggled with it because it needed to be, the book was very much sort of a biography, but the film needed to live in a way where it was going to attract people who normally wouldn't see a movie like that, because studios were really interested in, drawing more audiences, and not a lot of people are aware of this debate. So that was one responsibility. Then the second responsibility is, this is the first film that's really going to be about James Baldwin, so you can't insult those people. So everybody sort of had an agenda, right? And so I was really struggling on how to make all these people happy. And the big takeaway in the writing was, ultimately, I had to come to what was my way in, what got me excited, because at the end of the day, I have to get to the end page. And so I had all these things juggling in my head. And then I thought about, well, I think this is actually a love story. That actually, the irony is, it's about a love story with James Baldwin and his lover, and William F. Buckley and his wife. And that actually the debate is actually about how alike these men are and how very much different they are. And that was something that I stumbled on through. And so in terms of rewriting, to answer your question, it took me 3 years to finish that script. And that, everybody was stressing out because everybody obviously wants this thing fast. And what I realized in the process is that I need to constantly check in with people and tell them why it was taking the time it was taking. And that in various drafts, I would finally get to where I needed to get to. But I think the big takeaway in the rewriting was, the big discovery that I made was that ultimately I had to track and write down where I got excited, the things that I got excited about, and things that I was struggling with. And the reason why I always really encourage writers to do this is because ultimately you're going to get notes. And if you let the notes lead your process, then it's somebody else stepping into your process and helping you guide, as opposed to you really thinking about the things that you're speaking to your heart and using that to navigate you as well. So you have people with fresh eyes that are going to give you notes. Some of them are going to be useful, some are not. And then your own way through, those are the things that will keep you in the material. Because what I always try to prevent falling out of love with what I'm doing. And so the way I can do that is by navigating and taking notes and reminding myself, oh, I'm excited about this. I don't know why this moment works, but this gets me really excited.
That was deep. Thanks, Mark. We're gonna come back to you.
I think I'll talk about a feature that I just finished, and that my agents have finally given me like the green light to, we're gonna start trying to maybe get it set up somewhere. And I want to talk about it because it took so long. I started writing that script in maybe November of 2023, and I wrote a whole 120-page draft that I threw completely out the window at the top of 2025. And I was gonna give up. I was gonna really throw it away because I really couldn't find a way in. And now it actually is maybe the thing that I'm most proud of that I've ever written. I think that, it went through so many rounds of notes from a writers group, which continues to be super helpful for me, to be with a group of people that I trust. Notes from friends, notes from my mom, notes from my managers, and notes from my agents, and notes from myself. And I think what was strange about it is that I think where the script came from was, it's the most personal thing I've ever written. And it felt like at first I was trying to write about myself to explain myself. And I think you think that when you're going to write something that is inspired by yourself, you think it'll be easier. But I think that the problem then is that you get into I got into the trap of writing and not wanting the character to deviate from me. And I think it took a bunch of drafts for me to be like, okay, that's a version of this person. But if I actually compare my life with this man who is my protagonist, who actually, he's a typographer and he hates writing. And so I was trying to make him see the world through my lens, which wasn't going to work. And so I think when you're writing something about yourself, it's important to get out the version that's about you and then go back and write one that actually isn't about you at all, but take what you the emotion from the first version. So yeah, it's gone through maybe 100 drafts, and I imagine once hopefully it gets optioned or bought, we'll have to go through 100 more. But it's been fun.
Is that 100? Is that hyperbole or actually?
I I think it's hyperbole, but I could not count. It's been that many.
Uh, it happens. People have written over 100 drafts on something. I know it. Uh, John, would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm coming at it from a different side of things, and I'm trying to think of which process to tell because some would be horror stories and terrifying. I'm trying to go with one that has some twists and turns, but doesn't involve writers
Make
being
us,
fired or
make
anything like
us,
that.
make us feel good, John.
Yeah, no, it's so, since it's something I'm feeling good about at the moment, that the project you alluded to, the JT Molnar, who did Strange Darling, is going to direct for us. And we just sold at Berlin. And hopefully I'm
Congrats.
making this summer. Thank you. So it's been interesting. It's been a long journey on that one, though actually fewer drafts than, I've had many other projects over the years that have gone through more drafts, I've gone through more writers, but this was something I'm choosing it in part because I feel like emotionally I was connected to it in a way that might be akin to, not exactly the same, but akin to how writers feel about their own drafts. And I got so close to it over a period of time, but it was something we sold to Universal as a pitch with a brilliant writer named Brian Duffield, who's written a few movies that gotten made and is now becoming a director. He directed No One Will Save You. And anyway, he wrote this. I'd known him for a long time. And we didn't do, probably did, I'm sure he did a couple interim drafts that I wasn't involved with. I kind of did two or three with him where I gave him notes and we sort of worked on it before I went to the studio. Um, it ended up getting a great response. JJ loved it. The studio loved it. We did, a rewrite, but not a huge one to address some notes that everyone had. And he was great through that. And then it got to a point where it was, we were going out to cast. It was in pre-production. The script that I, really, really loved and was so invested in. And, as happens sometimes, we didn't get some passes from cast and a couple of horror movies didn't work at the box office. And ultimately, the momentum died and Universal put it in turnaround. We end up setting it up at a company called Infrared, that's part of Film Nation. Anyway, over the course of all the deal making, everything that happened, another movie of Brian's just started going faster, and he ultimately had to depart this one to go direct that. It's a big movie, another thing that's dear to his heart at Fox, which he subsequently made. And so we ended up bringing on a director, JT Molnar, who's a writer-director, and over the last couple months, it was finally time for him to sort of do his pass at the script. And so it was a weird experience of like, okay, he's going in, it was a director sort of making a script their own, and he had to put his personal stamp on it. And yet I was sort of more squeamish than I typically when rewrites are happening. I'm excited for, okay, it's going to get better. It's going to, all these flaws that I can see in it are going to be improved because this new voice is coming in. It's, it never works out exactly how I hope it might, but this was a different case where it's like, oh my God, it feels like this precious egg, and I don't want him to break it. I don't want him to sort of mess with it. But I also knew that it needed to happen. And JT's a brilliant writer who I'd worked with before as a writer and also a fabulous director. So he ended up doing a draft. I helped him through another one, and I'm glad to say, I think he found a great rhythm of kind of keeping so much of what was there, but adding his own touch, especially, his voice and sensibility and some great sequences. There was a piece tied to the villains in the story that was sort of very personal and tied to Brian's own experience of growing up. He had a unique family background. And there was a cult element that like touched a chord for him, but just was not something that JT had connected with. And was also something that we'd gotten a lot of feedback where we had taken it out of like, it sort of added some confusion and it felt like it was distracting from the core idea of this, which everybody felt was really strong. And so, he took that away. He simplified that. He changed a lot of the backstory, ended up changing a lot of the third act as a result. And did a great job. There, so it took me a moment to like mentally grieve and part with some of the stuff that I had loved and thought worked, even if some people had problems with it. Anyway, the last thing I'll add is, ultimately we showed, I got in the weeds with him on it. We did a pass or two. And then JJ had wanted to read it, or JJ was going to read it before we started sending it out to buyers. And it was really great to get his perspective because he he also had loved that earlier draft, but was not clinging quite so tightly. But there are a few things that he was able to see of like as small variations, small movements, losing a scene here had sort of lost certain things that he had loved in the second act. So he really did a deep dive analysis of what were those small changes that JJ was feeling from the structure of this part of the movie in one draft to the next, and sort of went back in, and JT was great of okay, yeah, I think there is a scene that was missing here that was causing this kind of feeling, and so we need to find that back so the rhythm works better, and we need to it was really surgical. This last pass, there's a few lines of you feel differently about the mom when she says this versus this, and I think it was great to have that other fresh perspective at the end of the day. And then knock on wood, we've had a great response thus far, and I'm sure there'll be more rewrites to come as we move towards production on this, but it feels like it's in a good spot.
Amazing. Congrats on getting it set up somewhere. That's huge.
Thank you.
I'll ask you all, and obviously, John, you'll find your own angle on this particular question, but it's a two-part question. Would love for each of you to walk us through sort of the process starting when you are feeling really excited about a draft and you're like, you know what, I think this is it, and I poured my heart into it, and I actually think it may be perfect, and there is absolutely nothing to critique about it, and there you go. And then the moment where you realize that maybe, it isn't all that perfect, and how do you tackle starting there up until sort of the next draft? And I guess you can maybe talk a little bit more philosophically, just how do you keep yourself excited? How do you navigate notes? How do you, as Marcus was mentioning, is stay true to the thing that first excited you about it? But I guess if you also want to share any practical tricks, whether it is hey, put everything in a master document, or I prioritize the ones that I hate first or the ones that I love first, or just how your brain works when you have to approach a rewrite. And I guess, John, for you, similarly, just sort of you get this thing where the writer that you're working with thinks it's absolute perfection, and then how do you constructively get them to get to the next stage? So yeah, whoever wants to go first, please.
I'll chime in. I mean, it very rarely happens that when I send an email, I'm like, that was good. I generally think it's good, and then I send the email and I realize it was bad. But if I thought it was good and I get notes that are suggesting to me that I have a lot more work to be done than I thought, which is most of the I think it's always helpful for me heading into the next rewrite to come up with a plan. I will compile the notes I received, but then I will distill them to actionable items. I have to do a pass to look at this. I need to look at this character, whatever it is. And I think intellectually or philosophically have to remember that I will like the project again. And when I like it, I also have to remember that I'll hate it again. Because I think you're always in one or the other. It's never actually peaceful. And I think something that also I think can infuse more excitement when I feel low is watching references. Ones that I hadn't thought of, that I asked from people who have read it, what it reminds them of. And just stuff that just is in the arena of what I want to accomplish, because I think a lot of the time you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And if you watch a lot of movies that are in the same area of what you want to do, a lot of them have a lot of similarities. And it's really, and if you read them too, that's even more helpful. I think it feels really comforting to watch a lot of movies that you like. They're what you want to do, and you're seeing exactly how they do it, and you're seeing that they're all doing it the exact same way, which you will often find is the case. And then you think, actually, it's not as hard as I think it is, because everyone is doing it this way. I know that's kind of cheating to say you should steal stuff, but You shouldn't not steal stuff. And I've always found that makes me feel better and more excited to go forward.
That was amazing and succinct and very practical. Thank you. I'm gonna use that. Marcus, you unmuted.
Yeah, that was all amazing. It inspired me. The way I articulate the projects that I'm working on and my love for them is I keep reminding myself that I love to write. That I love the act of the sitting down of writing makes me feel so good. It's therapeutic. I feel like I'm my full self. It's what I was called to do. And so I could be working on something that I'm not having the greatest time in terms of I'm not loving the notes maybe, or the story has gotten away from me somehow. But the act of actually writing is what I love most. And so because of that, I will always fall back in love with it. It will always present itself. Then I fall out of love. But the act of writing, if I can just remind myself, you love to do this, it gets me to the computer. It gets me to the chair, right? And so I want to offer this for whether you're starting out as a writer, whether you're mid-career or advanced career, doesn't matter. I think the most important thing to remember is that notes is part of the process, but it doesn't have to relegate the process. It doesn't have to lead. It doesn't have to be the leader, right? Because there's so many different iterations your script will go in that even if there's something you really love that nobody else loves, it can find its way back in. Because there's so many ways, right? That oftentimes part of the process is just showing the people that you're collaborating with that you can do the things that they're passionate about, or you can show them that you can do that. And then ultimately it's building that trust. And then also when you've built that trust with them, there are opportunities in which you can say, hey, I really feel good about this thing that got taken out. I think this is going to solve some of our issues, and bring that back. There's also moments in which you're going to fight. You need to fight for what's on the page, right? Because ultimately, as a writer, in terms of the writing, you're leading that process. But I say all that to say is because there's so many, what we do is very sensitive. For example, you could be let go of a project and then bring another writer on, right? So much of what we're doing, because I want to have that really honest conversation, is really about proving yourself, right? And so much about what we're doing as screenwriters, unless you have, it's just you and the studio has made a commitment to you, or the producers have made a commitment to you. Unless that's the case, so much of what you're doing is proving that you can get to the end, right? And so I just want to offer that really if I'm really keen for like writing stuff on a board and reminding myself, these are the things I'm excited about on this show, because that keeps me involved, that keeps me excited about it. And I just want to offer this one. I never forget, there was this one script I turned in, and I thought it was the best thing I've ever written in life. I was so happy to turn this thing in, and I turned it in and everybody hated it. Universally hated it. Except a friend of mine read it and it was like, this is masterpiece, and everybody else hated it. And I remember telling that friend, I don't think you can read. And that friend said to me, no, he said, the story you want to tell is not the story they want. But the story you're telling is the story that's super exciting for you. So you have to decide, is this the story you wanted to tell? And what's so interesting about that, was really something that I remind myself often, is that was like maybe 10 years ago. And revisiting that 2 years ago, everybody loved it. And I hadn't changed a word, right? So I offer that because what we do is so sensitive. And so you really, really want to have a thick skin. If you can develop a thick skin, that's what it takes to sort of navigate this terrain, because there's so many reasons why people have certain notes. There's so many reasons why people love certain drafts at certain times. There's a lot at play here. But if you can remind yourself, I am called to be a writer. I am going to continue to be a writer. I love writing. Stay in that space. Then there's nothing they can do to you. You will be focused and you'll get to the end.
You didn't think you'd be crying in a panel about writing, huh? George, you want to go next, and we'll end again with you, John. I don't want you to think that you're the dissenting opinion.
I'm the villain in this story. It's okay.
I love what Marcus just said, and I think that it's such a great thing to point out. Part of the process for me getting used to receiving notes has been understanding how to manage my emotions around it. And I think coming to understand that when I turn something in, I'm not expecting to get people to tell me all the things they love about it, because that's probably not their job. Their job's to make the thing better. And we're all trying to make this into the best possible version of itself. And to Marcus's point, those people might not be aligned with you about what that best thing is. That's very subjective. You're making art. But for me, knowing when I get these notes back, I'm probably going to feel hurt by it. I might need to actually go through a small grief process for the version of the draft that I thought was going to be the thing I made. Knowing to expect that really helps me get over it, because I know I'm going to need to take a day or two to grieve the last version of my project before I can have the emotional stamina or the will to do the lateral thinking required to get me to a different idea. I think knowing that there's a million ways to address any problem is actually really exciting for me, because I thought there was idea A and there was idea B, and I do a lot of woodworking too, and there's lessons that I take from it. You know, when you're sawing a piece of wood, sometimes the saw gets caught in it, and you try to saw harder and the saw gets caught in the wood. But what you really need to do is loosen your grip on the saw and then find the way that the wood wants to cut. And sometimes by loosening your grip and going more lightly, you actually make the cleaner, the straighter, the better cut. And so, just knowing that with writing, there's a million ways to take any story, that correct idea, there's also a million correct ways for you to solve something. And, if you're feeling stuck in the wood, you might just, you just need to find a way to not get depressed and to not become self-defeatist about it. And to know that if you, they say it in sports too, trust the process, that if you do that and you show up for the work, it's going to happen. So, I think the more I write, the more I realize, hey, like grief, depression, it can be part of it. You don't need to avoid it, but it doesn't mean you're not going to get to the best version of the idea.
I laughed with you, not at you, George. Just he's actually an amazing woodworker, and it's like a real thing that he does. That was a great analogy, by the way.
Well, I mean, I sorry to jump in one more time, but as a writer who works in a bunch of different disciplines, there's some things that are just evergreen for all the things you write. And for me, one of those things is usually when I write a new draft, whether it's prose piece, whether it's a poem, whether it's fiction or screenplay, almost always it gets better from one draft to the next. So also reminding myself, like, your work improves when you work on it is also really, really helpful for me. So, there's some things that just apply from one discipline to the other.
Mm-hmm. John, would love to hear your thoughts on this. I forgot what my question even was, but hopefully you remember.
I on the other, sitting on the other side of it, oftentimes, I think it was certainly a lesson I learned early on as a development executive of, like, you have to have a sensitivity to the writer receiving the feedback and their ego and their their emotional connection to the script. And I always try to lead with the positive and lead with the things that I am excited about, and also end with that. I mean, I think that's something. I remember some of the early days when I was working for JJ. He can be amazing at that. Right, you'd have these story meetings, and like at a certain point in the meeting, as a development executive, I would be like heartbroken of like how much was going to have to change and how much was getting ripped apart in this conversation. And yet by the end of the meeting, we all would leave the room like so energized and excited and like, oh my God, but this is going to be incredible. We're going to make the greatest movie ever. And like, he has a rare ability to sort of get you excited for all the work that's ahead. And I try to capture some of that where I can. It's Carlos, you know this well, being on the other end of it. Like the way I write notes tends to be very wordy and very specific and very long. So I know that as soon as the writer opens a document for me, they're going to see the amount of pages it is and have a moment of shock and horror. And so I try to mitigate that with how I begin it, how I end it, and also like within the notes themselves, trying to be as sensitive, as supportive, as sort of positive as possible, and also as specific as possible. Because I think certainly what I hate when I see from the studio, and I imagine for writers as well, like there's nothing worse than like a broad, vague, we don't like this. The second act is bad. Like, the sort of the unhelpful either negativity or just vague broadness. And so, I try to help with it by being as specific in how I'm feeling in page by page. Like, this is where it's starting to lose me, or I think, this doesn't quite work, but maybe have you thought about this? Like, trying to make it as kind of much of a conversation as possible, not just, tearing something to shreds and throwing it back at a writer.
And just to celebrate you for a second, I've gotten to be on the other end, the receiving end of your notes. And I say this to everyone, by the way, it's not just because you're here, but you write some of the best notes that I've ever gotten as a creative. And it's for that reason, it's a very practical thing. And you would never say something like the beginning of the movie slow. Because if, at least for me, I don't know, maybe someone likes to hear that note, but if I hear that, I just go into like a crisis because I'm like, I have absolutely no, like, yes, I understand the idea, but like that could mean 1,000 things. And I think that you are always so good at being hyper specific and just saying like, look, I feel like this beat could actually be twice, or like you don't need this line repeated, or consider this. And at least for me personally, it really makes a difference when you can tell that someone is not just giving you their first broad reaction, but actually put some thought into it and actually is helping you brainstorm and is offering suggestions, and whether they're right for you or not, that's the next step. But at least there's someone who's putting like thought and intention and like a lot of care into the notes. So you're
I,
you
I appreciate it. I was fishing for a compliment there, so I
yeah, I
appreciate
know. I know that's what you wanted. I know that's what you wanted. Um,
it.
Amazing. Okay. Well, the next question, I think, a lot of the people who are listening, watching, it's exciting. The community that shows up to our panels is pretty exciting because it really sort of like spans very broad spectrum of writers, people who are like really, really just starting, people with a lot more experience, everywhere in between. But I guess, sorry, what I'm trying, this is what I'm trying to ask. Um, if you're starting and you haven't fully developed sort of like an ability to navigate notes, or you may not even have someone who will give you good notes. If you're in LA and all your friends are screenwriters, then it's easy to send the file and be like, please read it and give me thoughts, or like let's arrange a table read or whatever. But if you're not in film school, if you're not in LA or New York, if you're not friends with a bunch of film or TV people, like, what do you think is a good way to think about how to approach a rewrite? Like, how can you get feedback? How can you get criticism? How can you sort of like get enough tools to push your thing forward when you don't have that experience? Because it definitely, I was one of those people who didn't think of myself as a writer. My English was not amazing, and it was like pretty hard to convince myself that I could do it. And I will say that every time you do it, it gets a little easier. But the first few projects are terrifying. So I don't know if any of you have thoughts of like how to just strengthen those muscles and sort of like do little cheats as you're still figuring out how to make something better.
I can start. I would say first of all,
That was the longest question ever. John would probably give me notes on how to ask that question a little simpler.
no, it's a great question. It's a very important question. First of all, I would say the first thing is, you know, it's really important that you find your way into a writers group, or that you're sharing your work with a group of writers, or at least one other writer, right? Or someone who has an understanding of the dramaturgy of the screenplay, right? Somebody who has who you admire, who you feel like would be great mentor for you, or a group of writers. And in fact, it'd be great to have two different groups, right? So that you're not getting notes from either one person or one group of people. That's the first thing I would say. And you can go online. There are writer groups online you can find. There is also, I'm not a big fan of the the AI software. But if you don't have anything, then I would suggest going in that direction. But I definitely would say you need 2 sets of notes. You need notes from one or more, 2 or more groups, right? So that's the first thing. And then you want to compare those notes, right? And the most important thing I think you have as a writer is your gut instinct. It will never fail you, but you have to exercise that muscle enough to know when you can hear something that's useful and when something that's not useful. So you're going to have to really tune in. How does that note make you feel? Does that note upset you because it is a note, or does that note upset you because they're right? Right? So you got to figure out what is your gut saying to you? That's the most important thing you do. In terms of the emotional journey of the characters, that's your heart, and the plot and the architecture of your script, that's your brain. So those 3 things you want to constantly be honing in on and exercising as a writer. The more you write, the more you get notes from people, the more you exercise those muscles, the better you are as a writer. That's number 1 going in. Second thing going in, I would say, is you really want to learn the art of what is the note behind the note. That is a very, very particular thing that only you can really hone on your own, right? So it's sometimes everybody wants to help you. I always lead with love. So I always go, okay, these notes are terrible, but I know these people want my piece to be better. Why wouldn't they? They have nothing to gain for the thing not making it, to the screen. So what are they saying? Let me get behind what that is. What is the impulse behind that note, right? So you study the note, and then it will click. A light bulb will go on. You're like, oh, there. Let me give you an example. So this screenplay that I just talked about earlier, one of the notes I got earlier was well, we can't have James Baldwin fall in love with a white guy, even though the love of his life was a white guy. And I was like, I'm doing what happened in real life because he's my idol. That's happening. But the producers felt we understand that, but we want to show Black love on the screen. So that's a real big thing that I had to challenge. And I kept struggling with it, I kept getting the note, kept letting the note. And then it occurred to me that why can't it be both? Why can't he be in love with a white man and a Black man? And the whole story opened up, right? So it's finding that note behind it is key. And I guarantee you, if you keep studying the note, don't give up on the note, don't get frustrated by the note, don't just take the note either. Just study the note and see what the note is saying to you. That's that gut feeling. Okay, and if you feel like you're isolated, if you're alone and you don't have a group, you can find a group online. I also want you to be very careful. Just don't go for the first group of people, that you become in contact with. Make sure you find people that you trust, people that feel okay, these notes feel useful to me, right? And don't be afraid to share your work, but also make sure everything's copyrighted. Protect yourself. And the last thing I would say is, if you really feel strongly about something and you can't sleep and it keeps bothering you, chances are you're on the money. Don't change it.
I feel like you just gave 10 quotes that are worth putting on a poster. Anyone would like to go next? John, I'll go over to you. I don't want you to be last all the time.
Yeah, it's just a tough one. I don't know. I don't totally know how to answer this one from my side of things.
I guess it happened again. I don't even know the question. What was the question? Oh,
How to get notes
for new writers. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I guess maybe when you do work with, I'm totally paying attention, by the way. I was just, Marcus took me on a journey.
Yeah.
When you work with writers that are starting out and writers who may not have, I guess you become that person, right? But how do you navigate sort of offering tools and letting them stay true to the thing that they're excited about?
Yeah, I think, I'm going to steal a phrase that Marcus used, but it's very true. The sort of the note behind the note idea, the even when for all building me up as a great notes giver, I usually, myself and any studio exec or producer, we very rarely have the right answer. We very rarely have the solutions. And so, I think the 2 most common mistakes I see young writers make when dealing with notes and feedback is, one, digging in your heels on everything and saying, no, it's perfect and it's great, and how dare you say that? And the other is the exact opposite end of just taking verbatim everything I'm saying and doing it. It's you have to find the right middle ground, as Marcus was saying, of like, what is the, I might not have the right prescription for what the issue is. I may not even, the diagnosis may be wrong, but there's something there, especially if it's coming up multiple times. Like there's something that is not quite working or bothering people. And so what is that? What is the problem? And then what is the solution? And usually, as you mentioned, Charles, how often in my notes, like maybe it's this, what if it's this? And, sometimes it's simple. It's like just cutting a line and that's an easy thing. But when it's, in most cases, there's some smarter solution that is needed. And I am not the writer and I'm not the person equipped to do it. And so I think, I also often get, I'll confess, some executives and producers are not this way and just want to have their own note done exactly right. But I certainly find myself feeling disappointed when someone just does exactly what I suggested or does, just takes it and does that, because I'm sure there's a better solution out there. I'm sure hopefully they're capable of something better. And so I think that's the biggest advice I would give to sort of writers starting out.
That's great. Aiyana, George, either of you wants to go?
Yeah, I think part of your question too was like if you are lacking the resources of like living in LA and finding those people. I mean, I think that it is, I think, crucial to have a group of people giving you notes on a specific script. I think that what also is important on a skill building level is like learning how to be able to note myself a little bit. Like I started in entertainment writing script coverage for a literary management company, which means that I read a lot of scripts. I read a lot of really bad scripts. And like, I think it's just my eye for seeing what's wrong with things was honed, reading so many things. And I think if you're reading also, it would be good for you to read good scripts too. I think that'll probably help you even more. But I think the more that you read, the more that you will like feel structure without having to, read a structure book. Because I think at this point I've read so many scripts and written enough that it's like I can just tell where something is missing because like I've exercised the muscle. And I've found that that's this like skill of noting myself has been very crucial because I mean, this is very ego filled, but I think when I tend to send people stuff to be noted, frankly, I know what's wrong with it. There are some things that like I glaze my eyes over as I like proofread because I'm like, no one's going to know that that's bad. Everyone always knows that it's bad. Like you think that you can sneak it past, but you really can't. But like, I think that is important. I mean, it's important to get the feedback that you can't be lazy and just skip over this stuff, but like exercising the muscle to the point where I do generally know what's wrong with stuff and like talking it through with other people is very, very helpful. And I see blind spots that I wouldn't, but I do think that reading and watching is only going to help you. And like, whether you are in LA or whatever, like the resource that you always have is reading and watching stuff. And I know that's not like specifically to whatever script you're working on, but I do think it's really important.
Yeah. Thank you. That was great. George, you want to close this out?
Yeah, just briefly, Aiyana touched on this for a second, but I think even if you don't have somebody who is a trained writer to read your script, if you have people around you whose perspective and intellect that you respect, conversation is such a powerful tool. The things that you're thinking about, the ideas that you're batting around in your head. I mean, and for whether you're starting out or a super experienced person, I mean, if ever possible, to have conversations with the people giving me notes rather than just getting a bullet point list from them. I can't tell you how many times there's been something that I thought was such a problematic note. And then when we actually are face to face and opening it up to a conversation, it's just like, boom, the idea just flows out from that back and forth. So big advocate for just talking about stuff with people.
Yeah. And I see that y'all are sharing a bunch of resources in the chat, which is amazing. And it's the most exciting thing about these chats, just how supportive and like encouraging and practical these conversations are. So please keep it going and keep the chat uh, friendly and supportive as always. Cool. Okay, I think we've got a couple of minutes before we pass it over to our Q&A. Can you help us understand sort of like when it's gone, if you can think of a particular, you don't need to share the particular instance, but if you can think of a moment when you've just like really struggled either with a particular note, like because a note can be the beginning of the movie feels slow, but a note can also be like, hey, this is just not totally working. You know, like the I see where you're going, but it's just not getting there. Um, or or something that's like philosophically or ideologically just like against what you would believe in, you know? Or relationship, like if you can just think of a particularly challenging experience that you've had along the journey and, feel free to share as little or as much as you want about it, but I think more importantly, just how did you navigate it and you feel like make you stronger?
This is less of a note thing and more of a like a writer's block, so to speak. Uh,
Mhm.
Note, because I think sometimes I'll be in a place where I'm looking at something and I know that people have read it and they don't get it. And it just, what I feel in my body that I want the thing to be is just for some reason it's not translating. And I think to do an analogy of my own, I do the New York Times crossword a lot. And like a lot of the times with a crossword, like you'll have filled in a whole corner, but something's not working. And like what honestly almost every time helps is like erasing the entire corner and re-putting the stuff in, because that's how you find what's wrong. And so like I think when I tend to get stuck in and this is true, this is actually true like in a TV writer's room, but also like in my own work of like if you seem to be throwing stuff at the wall that's not sticking, that like is within, like if you're trying to solve one specific character problem and you keep throwing stuff at it, and nothing is sticking, I've found it helpful to be like, okay, well maybe that's not the problem. Like let me ask a question that's completely outside of the question that I allowed myself to ask at first, because like if none of this is sticking, maybe we should throw out a pitch that's completely different. And like more often than not, actually that pitch will help us solve the other one. Like it just takes a second of stepping back, I think will show you a lot of what you're missing. And also I think will make you feel better. Because I think if you're like stuck in something that feels dirty and just for a second, if you step away and it feels clean, it like, I don't know, it makes you like more willing to sit down and do the work. And that's sort of why that's why you say like writer's block like this, because I don't really think that's a thing. I think you have to just do it. But when it's hard to do it is when it feels like nothing is sticking, and then that's when maybe you should just throw stuff at a different wall.
Mm. Uh, Marcus George.
Um, I'll mention two specific times that I got notes that are, I think, taught me lessons. One of them is about music, and when I was working on an album 10 years ago that I did in 2016, I had two songs on it that were pretty risky conceptually, that required a lot of the listener. One of them was a song that Carlos directed the music video for called Stick to Your Guns. And it's about a school shooting, and it requires the listener to understand that I'm speaking from the voice of one of those perpetrators of violence in the first verse. And it's not until you get to the second and the third verse that the song develops and you understand that this is making the opposite statement about that. And another song called Going Down that's very risque and risky for different reasons. But I had a lot of smart people in my life tell me that I should take those off the album, that they would potentially be, disrailing or derailing to my career, that people wouldn't be able to stick around for a minute and a half to let the concept develop. And I mean, my dad told me that. He's a really smart guy. My manager did. I mean, I really had to dig my heels in, and I kept those songs on the record. And when I put it out, I thought that they might be received really poorly and potentially really anger a lot of people who were misinterpreting my intention. That didn't happen at all. People understood what I was going for. And what lesson I learned is not to underestimate my audience. And the TV and film writers with more experience can speak to this to me, but this is one thing that I'm trying to take through my life is like, if the note that I'm getting is your audience is too stupid to understand what you're going for, that's probably a bad note. Like, because you're going to make your stuff worse, like write good layered stuff and don't be afraid of, your audience needing to be smart and willing to pay attention to get it. That's a philosophical thing and maybe a different approach for everybody, but I really believe in that. And then I got a very specific note on the script I'm working on right now from two different advisors at Sundance, which I just came out of. Lulu Wong, who did The Farewell, had a very hot take that all the other advisors did not have about how I should basically just rip out my whole first act and start at the moment of crisis, kick the door down, and then backfill all the character information later in the script. Michael Arndt, who is another one of my advisors who wrote Little Miss Sunshine, among a lot of other great stuff. I told him about that note, and he was like, first acts are so important. You can't get rid of the first act. That's a bad note. So I had like two titans whose opinions I respected so much fighting each other over what the right solution to this was. And Carlos and I are in the thick of this right now. But to me, the lesson of that is you might be caught between two really smart people with different opinions. And at the end, it's your opinion that matters the most. So, you take all that in and then you're the captain of your ship.
You're about to really disappoint a legendary filmmaker no matter what you do.
Yep.
It's funny, this question has really hit me right in the gut because it's something I'm experiencing right now in a particular project. And what happened is the exec that was on it from the gate really loved my take on the story, and we kind of hit it. We kind of had really great chemistry. And then this often happens, the exec is no longer there. And so I was assigned two other execs who are lovely people, but don't have the passion for the idea. So the notes kept, the notes went in the direction that I did not prefer. And it was one of those moments I never forget. It was actually July, I never forget. I was on vacation and we were doing a notes call. And I said, I'm going to say the thing you're not supposed to say as a writer, but I can't help it. I'm going to say, and I did. And I said, it looks like we're trying to make two different things. And I normally, if you say that, the job is over, right? So I was like, they're about to let me go. But I had to because I was so frustrated because I can't make work because it's not what I pitched. I don't even know what they're trying to be honest. So they were really quiet for it was like a whole minute of silence, just staring at me on the Zoom. And then they went back to the notes they were going to give. They weren't even entertaining it. So I was like, okay, now I'm really frustrated. I kind of wish they would just let me go. So then, just to be in full transparency, the last stage that we just had, I really just wanted the check. I really just needed to get paid at this point. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to write the thing so I can get paid because this is not going to work out. And then while I was doing that, I remembered something that I promised myself as a writer that I should always do is have fun. I was like, I've now let this whole project get mired in things that I don't care about. And I forgot the most important thing is have fun. The reason why I wanted to tell this story is because I thought it would be fun to do it. So I said, look, I know it's not going to happen anyway for me, so let me just have fun. And I remember working in it and having so much fun writing that draft. And then when I turned it in, which was last week, the notes were made. It was like it was a whole different thing. They didn't even talk about the fact that I went in a completely opposing direction that they wanted. They were like, we love this world. We love living in this world. Da, 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 da. Do you know what I mean? And ultimately, they were also upset because they was like, who's the central character? I changed everything. But I say all that to say, it's like, if you have a passion for something, If you really believe in something, if that's your way in, hold on to those things because they will all serve you. Even if ultimately you and that entity or whoever you're partnering with can't see eye to eye, you can take it somewhere else. You can find other collaborators, but hold on to that anchor, that thing that's keeping you into that thing. Stay there. And then second thing I want to offer too is often writers, first of all, guys, study the format, study the form. Aiyana said this earlier, this is super important. Like, don't just like, I know you love movies and so you want to write one, but how it looks on the page is a whole different beast. So you want to be reading screenplays and you want to make sure you're getting screenplays that are not necessarily the shooting script, but the script that got it sold. That's a whole different thing as well. Really, really important. Then third thing I would say is our brains, when you're writing, you're doing left and right brain. Believe it or not, a lot of screenwriting is math. A lot of it is formula. A lot of it is like pattern and rhythm. So using that part of your brain and then the creative brain. Well, the brain is really hard to use both sides at the same time. So what I do is I put everything out on the walls. I cover the walls with images. The actual architecture, the structure of the screenplay, I chart it out. You know, the David Mamet thing with the 3x5 cards. Then here's another thing, cast it. Cast the baby, right? Who are your dream actors? Meryl Streep, put her up there. Viola Davis, put them up there. So that you're imagining those words in those actors' mouths. You know how they sound, right? As much as you can spread out the piece of art across your wall in your room, you have now created a sanctuary for your work, and it will speak to you. All of those images and all of that architecture will speak to you and help you navigate through that world. So you can do it. It is not impossible. Oftentimes, I think, especially young writers or new writers to this art form, feel like it is an uphill battle and no one will ever read their work. But the truth is, we have all been there. Nobody was walking down the street and somebody grabbed them and said, hey, write this screenplay for Universal. That has happened to no one. We all have, the work has made room for us, right? So I just want you to really believe, because I know you hear this all the time, but it's very true. If you continue to work, if you continue to believe in yourself, not be afraid to share your work with other people, at the same time protecting your work, but also like getting those layers on that page. That is what people is undeniable. Even if they don't agree with the premise or where the story is going, your craft, your artistry was undeniable and they will want to work with you. So just stick with it.
The Church of Marcus Gardley. John, anything that you would like to add?
It's a hard act to follow. I guess it's I keep coming back to it's not quite apples to apples, but the closest I can kind of compare to getting those notes as I hear all this is like, you know, it's sort of later in the filmmaking process. Like when you're going through test screenings and sort of audience reactions, and you know, myself along with director and writer usually at that point are, you know, trying to understand, you know, it's a similarly tricky point where it's like you have to sort of separate the good notes from the bad notes. What are the things that, you know, that they're not getting, and that's okay because it's challenging and it's interesting, and things where it's like, no, they're not getting it because it's not working, and you need to be able to sort of listen to that. And I'll just say, you know, I've had one thread that's gone through a few movies I've worked on, and some version of this happened a couple times where like there'll be something. Often it's like a backstory, or a couple times it's been like a character relationship that is not on screen, but like a key relationship in the past. Like in 10 Cloverfield Lane, it was Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character had like, we actually shot like 4 different versions of a relationship that she had with a guy who she was leaving at the beginning of the movie. But we always picked up with her when she was on her way to meet her fiance in shaky ground, or was leaving her boyfriend, like all these things that we kept trying to find the right thing to make your character story work, and it never worked. And in parts we were also trying to get back to like, well, at the end she's got to go back there, she's going back to this person, and like it was indicative of something that's happened a few times where it's like we're trying to get people to invest in a relationship that is not on the screen, but it's like it's in our minds. Like we've always talked about it, we've, you know, it's on the page, we've lived with the script for so long, and so we felt something, but the audience just was never connecting to it. And ultimately we just simplified it and just made it about her and her own empowerment and kind of coming, you know, discovering her sort of warrior self, and just lost a lot of that. And it's something that's happened on a few movies now where we've had these elaborate backstories that at a certain point in the process is like, oh, this is the key emotion to the movie, this is what it's all about. And then you realize like, oh, it's not coming through, it's not on screen. And things we've been rescued a few times by having great actors who have, you know, been able, because they had something in their head they were playing, or so it didn't require a 3-page scene of dialogue because they were able to do it in a look or in a moment, or just sort of like naturally infuse their performance. But anyway, it's a long-winded way of saying I think sometimes, and this is obviously later in the process, but you can lose sight of the forest for the trees of what's really coming through, because there's so much that's sort of in your mind of what's in the script and what's in the characters' heads, and like whether it's on screen or on the, sometimes it's not on the screen, sometimes it's not on the page, and you have to kind of be reminded of that.
Oh, that's amazing. Wait, can you guys hear me? Because my internet's
Yeah.
having a moment. Oh, you can hear me. Okay, that's good. Thank you, John. I was stressing through this whole thing because I started freezing and I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
But I heard you. I heard. Well, if I do freeze, we're gonna move to the Q&A so you can look at the questions there. I'm gonna try to read some questions and we'll see how many we can get through. How do rewrites work while you're filming? And that's not like an easy, quick question to answer, but if anyone has any thoughts to just jump into it.
I'll speak to this. I can certainly relate to. I've been on some projects where way too much rewriting is being done as we're filming, and sometimes it's just a matter of, you have a certain window to shoot the movie, and you got to go, and things are still being worked on, and the script never quite gets there, and so, things are constantly evolving, and that's not ideal by any means. But it forces you to, you need a writer on set. It's certainly a lot harder if it's a writer director. Hopefully there's a writer separate from the director who can kind of be working on that and doing that and pushing it forward. I think the healthier process is when you have a writer who is there and can see each of these scenes as they're being written, or as they're being filmed, and as they're being rehearsed, and see what's working, see what's not working as the scene is developed, and be able to sort of adjust some lines, adjust some things on the fly. I think that, when we had the luxury of that process, it's been amazing, and great things tend to come from it. But also, it's the adage is like you develop one movie, you shoot one movie, and then you edit a different movie, and it's kind of constantly evolving. And I think it's a story he's told publicly, so if I can say it, but like JJ's talked a lot about when he did The Force Awakens. They were, I think, 2/3 of the way through production when
it's about to get so juicy.
No, I don't think I'm breaking this, but famously Harrison Ford broke his leg on an onset accident on that movie, and they had to pause production for a month. But he sort of talks about how the rare opportunity that afforded that you usually don't get in the process of production. Things are moving so fast. There's so much going on. You don't really have time to take stock of everything. But that was a rare instance. And obviously, not to say JJ caused Harrison Ford's leg to break. That did not happen. But it did, as horrible as it was, it sort of gave them this unique opportunity of sort of looking at what they've shot, adjusting, kind of taking some of the lessons of it. And it really, he talks about how much that helped save the movie in a lot of ways. They were able to course correct in real time. And I think that's the challenge with shooting, is there's so much, everything is moving so fast, everything is going so fast. It's great to have a writer separate from the director who can kind of keep an eye on some of that, and be able to sort of offer thoughts, and hopefully smaller course corrections as you go, and not too great a ones, because that's where you run into trouble.
Yeah. I love that you're all sharing real juicy secrets. We kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but Colin Matthews is asking, how do you fall back in love with a script after you've done so many drafts where you can barely sort of stand to read it anymore? Do you have any tricks of things that you can do to sort of get those juices flowing?
The first thing that comes to mind is I would just have other people read it. Get some food, have some friends, especially if some of them are actors, and have them read it, because it's low stakes. But then you're going to hear it probably in a new way, and probably hopefully fall back in love with it again. And then if that doesn't work, sometimes it's just good to give yourself one little thing to focus on, right? So if there's one, even if it's a small thing that you still love about it, that's your way back in. That's the thing that's managed to maintain through all of those rewrites. And then the last thing I would say, and this is probably a little bit controversial, but I kind of believe it, that the day I knew I was a rewrite is when I did a page 1 rewrite. That's when I knew I was a writer. It's something about if you can do a rewrite of your script and like be excited about doing it, you know what I mean? And like get through it, you congratulations, you have found the career for you. Because that's what it calls for. Eventually you'll be doing them all the time. Right now, when I get notes and I realize to do a page one rewrite, I don't even panic because I'm so used to it. And I'm not even patting myself on the back. It's just a reality. All the writers talk about that all the time. Some writers, they get, like, I think George mentioned this earlier. I just got a series of notes and it was like 3 pages and I didn't even read it. I just got mad. You know what I mean? I just got mad and I just refused to read it. And then I had to read it and they weren't even bad. They were great. Do you know what I mean? So I'm like, I'll constantly having to remind myself that this is part of the process and actually everybody wants you to deliver the best script possible. And so, yes, you have to really, really sort of like work yourself up and be like, oh, you know what? I'm going to embrace this page one rewrite. I'm going to rewrite this whole thing. I'm going to find my way back into falling in love with this script. Think of it as like someone that you dated and you guys broke up and you got back together. Like you still have those feelings are still there. They just been buried under, the breakup and the fight at the movie theater, whatever it was, right? It's still there. The love is still there. You just have to remind yourself, oh yeah, I fell in love with this person. I fell in love with this script. I still have the same heart. It's still possible.
I have a trick that works for me. It might not work for everyone because some people really believe in just focusing on one project and not letting yourself get distracted by something that could take it out of your mind. But I personally believe in the double procrastination method, which is to have 2 projects that I'm working on at the same time. And when I get so fucking sick of this one starts to look really exciting to work on. Like, this and this one, now I go over to this one and I'm excited about this one. I'm in a flow state. And then I hit a wall. This one starts to feel pretty bad. But then this one gets a little exciting again over here. So I just hop between one and I just procrastinate my way to productivity.
Anyone else wants to chime in?
I mean, I was going to say the exact same thing. And I think it can also be a matter of taking some time. Like sometimes the script that I was talking about for this movie that I just did so many drafts of, there was a period of like 6 months where I didn't look at that. And I was writing something else. And then you come back to it and you're a different person. So, that's always helpful.
Yeah. John, do you have any tricks that you use to encourage your writers that you feel like are losing the spark to get inspired again?
Trying to emphasize the positives in the script, the things that everybody loved, the reason we got involved with it in the first place. I think I wish I had a better answer, but no, trying to focus on, not take a moment to not just focus on the problems, but focus on what it is that's great about it and why we're working on this in the first place.
I'll answer well, it wasn't my question, but I'll answer my own question because Marcus, you came to one of our screenwriting camps and you gave this incredible advice about building a magical shoebox, and you can probably describe it better than I can, but essentially is this idea that you can and you will get inspiration from physical objects and from creating sort of like a little altar of sorts of things that mean a lot to you and specifically relate to the project that you're working on. So Marcus kept saying, like, when you start a project, build your magical shoebox, which, could be literally a shoebox, and just put stuff in there like photos, books, objects, bracelets, like anything that you think will help you through the difficult times and remind you sort of like the soul of what you're doing. Am I describing this correctly, Marcus?
You're absolutely right. And it's Maria Irene Fornes, very famous playwright. This was her genius idea. And her theory is that because you had so much joy collecting these objects and they all have to relate to your story, that's super important. Somehow, it doesn't need to be literal, but somehow these objects relate somehow to this story. And it's just a feeling you'll get. So you'll be walking along the beach, you'll get a shell, and you'll be like, okay, this reminds me of a scene in this script, right? And you put all of those things, and you wait until the box gets full. And then when you start writing, the theory is anytime you get blocked, the answer comes right out of that box. That's why it's magic.
And I will say that I did it for the last movie that I just worked on, and it really got me out of some like very complicated time.
Very cool.
And like it not only got me out of it, but it's like it unlocked a whole lot of like magic when I thought I was stuck, and all of a sudden I like opened up a book. I was like, oh my God, the answer is right here. And not to make this all about me, but I took my box into production and I had it in my room next to set. And every time that I felt like I was losing my ground or forgetting the point of it all or getting distracted by all the, practical layers that come with filmmaking, I would go to this box and I would just pull something out. And every single time it was like, okay, I get it. I can do this. So something else to take from Marcus. Okay, before we say goodbye, what's a controversial question? No, a fun question. I don't know what to ask. What is the worst note you have ever gotten, or the worst note that you have ever given, John?
All right, I'll since you called me out, I'll start. I'm sure there are many worse notes that I've given, but I will say, uh, that to go back to the very first story I was telling about, sort of giving, um, sort of doing a new draft with a script that I love with a new writer. They wrote a new opening, and again, it was. I think it was like the initial shock of like, oh my God, this is a different script now, and now there's this whole new set piece, and I don't know if it's working, and are we giving away too much too soon? And so I gave a note of like, maybe we should hold this back. Like this should be, do we want to start with this, or can this be a flashback till, can we save it till Act Two so we don't reveal too much too soon? And to be fair, the writer sort of had implanted the idea of, I'm not sure, is this too much too soon? I don't know. So we tried it, and it did not work at all. And he moved it back. And as been going out with it the last 2 weeks, every single meeting started with, the opening is the best thing ever. I can't believe, it's so good, it's so amazing. And every time, like, oh God, I almost killed that. I almost destroyed it. So I don't know. The lesson is I don't know anything, but I'm glad he overruled me and went back to how he initially had it.
Props to you both. Aiyana?
Um, I I just this is an overall thing because I can't think of a specific one because everything I write is so perfect that I don't really get bad notes. Um, I really, really hate the note. She wouldn't say that, or I don't think they would say that because I always feel like, well, I created them, and I think she would say that. So, I mean, that's one of those times where you have to take the note behind the note of like, I have to think more critically about this character's voice and, characters speaking differently from each other and all of these things. But that really grinds my gears.
Yeah, or like that would never happen is also
Yeah.
like, oh, you have no idea that I'm literally pulling this from my journal, but I'm glad
And
you think
also,
so.
like, it's a movie. Sometimes, like, when notes get in the weeds about like what's realistic and what's not, yeah, it's a movie, and that's fine.
George, oh, you going, Marcus?
I go, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, George.
No, do it.
So two notes that I always get, which are in line with the one Aiyana just mentioned, is one, they always say, this character is not likable. And I'm like, everybody on the planet is not likable. Do you know what I mean? Like, what is that? I grew up, the family I grew up in, a lot of people are mean, and I like write mean people because that's the people I grew up with, and I love the mean people because they just have the best comedy, they're all interesting, and then when they have moments where they really break, your heart breaks because they're mean it's an exterior, right? It's armor, right? So so that note drives me crazy, and the other note I always get was like too much flavor, which always has to do with my race, I feel like, but I always get that note about it's too much flavor, which I don't know what to do with. Who wants to eat anything that doesn't have flavor in it? So I didn't even know what to do with that note. So I was just like smile and nod, but those are the two notes I always get.
Both great. George?
I would say the thing that makes me laugh or, drives me the most crazy is when two notes from the same person directly conflict with each other. And that could happen to be like literally the problem that you're trying to get me to solve is, I'm solving it here, and then you're like the opening is too comedic, the opening is too dark, or I need you to make more room for the climax, but also like, don't compact the first act so much. And it's like, well, something's got to give somewhere. So I think when those two things are in direct conflict, and that happens sometimes, that's where I don't know what to do with it.
Well, I just want to say thank you to the four of you for making time. And as you can see from the very lively chat, this is all knowledge that is immediately going to become very, very practical and useful to so many people. So thank you for taking the time. Thanks for answering all these questions and giving us all these secrets that you probably shouldn't have given us, but now we know. Thank you all for tuning in. Much, much appreciated. It's like there's hundreds of you here, and it's so crazy to see. So much appreciated. See y'all soon.
Another huge thank you to everyone on today's panel for such a great conversation about the art of the rewrite. Thank you, Carlos, as always, for bringing it all together. This episode is part of our ongoing collaboration with Antigravity Academy. These satellite sessions are free, regular conversations with high-level individuals in film and TV. They're designed to make resources and information available to as many up-and-coming filmmakers as possible. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, be sure you are subscribed to Dolby Creator Talks. You can find links to the show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video versions now available on YouTube and Spotify in our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Dolby Creator Lab, head on over to dolbycreatorlab.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can subscribe to our mailing list and access the entire library of episodes of this podcast, including all the other satellite sessions with Carlos that we've already released. This special panel discussion is brought to you in partnership with Antigravity Academy and CAPE, the Coalition of Asian Pacifics in Entertainment. If you'd like to learn more about those organizations, you can find information in our show notes as always. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Kahn. Thanks for joining us.